Carlos Nelson with Cascade Media, and today we're on our educational channel, and we're lucky to have our newest superintendent here in the Kansas City School District, Dr. Collier. How you doing, Doc?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
We're doing all right. I had to go back to my usual. Let's go back to kindergarten and tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Where you grew up, what schools you went to, and above all, what I'd like you to do, mention one or two mentors that help you develop certain ways of thinking and things that you think really contributed to your maturing into the person that you are.
All right. Well, I was actually born and raised on the Kansas side. Don't hold that against me. Born and raised on the Kansas side, graduated from Kansas City, Kansas public schools at Sumner Academy of Arts and Sciences, and lived my whole life over there. I ended up going to KU for my undergrad degree, then came back to Kansas City. And when I got back to Kansas City public schools, where I am now, they were looking for music teachers. And my major was originally music. I'm a classically trained singer. And my original goals were to go off to New York and to perform on Broadway or at the Metropolitan Opera, whichever one would have me. But I started teaching music because my parents said, you need to work and save some money before you go. Started teaching and actually fell in love with it. And a little backstory here, which is why this is important, is that my mother is a teacher. And growing up, she was actually my first and second grade teacher, and then later became my principal. And I felt like I spent all of my childhood in a school helping to grade papers, helping to do chalkboards. They didn't have whiteboards back then, but helping to clean the chalkboards and put this information up for the next day and do bulletin boards. So I always said, I'm not going to be a teacher. I was determined that I wasn't going to be, but I truly believe that our purpose and our steps are ordered, and education was actually where I belonged. And I found my way there, and I found it through my passion, music. But when I started teaching music, I discovered that that is actually what I wanted to do. It was nothing like sharing the love and the joy and the passion for music with children. And I found that music was a universal language. There was no child I couldn't connect with or couldn't teach or develop a relationship with, because music is powerful. And so I discovered that I was able to influence and speak into children's lives and to make a difference as a teacher. And so I remained in education. I made a choice to continue teaching, and then went on and got additional degrees and training. And I've been an educator ever since, and I love it. And I'm so thankful to be doing the thing that I believe that I was created to do.
Where'd you get your additional degrees from? Give them a little bit about that.
Okay, yeah, I earned my master's degree from Avila University, and that was a wonderful experience. Quite different from KU, where I sat in classes with 1,000 students. But at Avila, it was much more intimate, much smaller setting, and I felt like I really was able to delve into the foundations of education. It was a great experience for me. But then I went on and got my educational specialist degree from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And then I finished that later, my doctorate degree there at UMKC as well.
Excellent. All right, let's get down to where the tire meets the road. What are some of your priorities as it relates to the Kansas City School District, and how you see moving forward for 2023, 2024? We don't want to go too far out, but
yeah. Well, so I have what I've called my 5 big rocks, things that I think that are critically important that we focus on as a district. And one of them you will hear me talk about extensively. And I believe that's because it's so important. And that number 1 rock is literacy. I think, to me, reading is foundational for all other learning. And we have a moral imperative to ensure that every child that walks through our schools and leaves our schools leaves a reader, a writer, an effective communicator. I believe that in the school system, we can do a lot of great things, and I believe we have done a lot of great things. But if we don't focus on making sure that our students are proficient in reading, we are doing them a disservice. And so that is the most important thing that we're focusing on right now as a school system. And of course, you can't just focus on one thing, but I want to make sure that we have a laser focus there, that we don't get caught doing a lot of things that are important and miss the main thing. And for me, the main thing is literacy for our children. The second big rock is mathematics, because we know that there are many fields that they can go into, engineering, science fields that require math. And we want to make sure that our students are proficient in that as well. So many of our students, our Black and Brown students, will be able to thrive in STEM careers and fields, but we have to make sure we're adequately preparing them for that. So we're also focusing on math. The third big rock we're looking at as a school system is what is called culturally responsive teaching and practices. And why this is important is that culturally responsive teaching is an educational pedagogy that was designed specifically to address the needs of culturally and linguistically diverse students. In Kansas City Public Schools, 90% of our students are children of color. 24% of our students speak English as a second language, and that is one of our fastest growing demographics here in Kansas City. And so I felt like it was important that we bring an educational pedagogy that is designed for our children. And what it does is it acknowledges all that our students have within their culture, what they're bringing into the classroom. And rather than educators viewing our students as coming in with deficits or coming in empty, not having anything, our students have a wealth of knowledge. And it's a wealth of knowledge that has been derived from their family and their community and their culture and their neighborhood and the arts that they're familiar with. We have to make sure that we tap into all those things so that our students can then be prepared for additional learning. And so we're focusing on that as a school system, not just for our teachers, but also for those of us in the Board of Education, those of us principals, because we also have to meet the needs of our families through that same lens, that culturally responsiveness. And then that fourth big rock is social emotional wellness. And I think we're talking a lot about that now that the pandemic has hit, but we know that this has been a need for a very long time, that we really start tending to the social emotional needs of our kids. We know that if they don't have food to eat, it's difficult to learn. If they don't have their basic needs met, it's difficult to learn. It just puts me in the mindset of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it shows in that hierarchy, the lower rungs of the hierarchy are your physiological needs and your physical needs. And what his study shows is that if you don't meet those basic needs, you'll never get to the place where you can grow and get to self-actualization, where we want our kids to thrive in academics and in other things. They can't get there if they have these needs that have not been met. And so that's emotional, physical, spiritual, all the needs our kids have. We have to make sure that we're addressing and meeting those in our schoolhouse. And we can't expect for it to be done outside of the school necessarily, because we can't control those things. But when they come to us, we've got to make sure that we have the things in place, supports in place, partnerships with our community, folks helping us to ensure that our students' needs are met. And then that fifth big rock is family and parent engagement. And I think this is a really critical piece, because too often I believe families and parents have been left out of the equation. We've gotten in the habit of sharing information, one-way communication, telling everything to them, but we've got to make sure that we open up those lines of communication and we actually hear our families and we hear our community, and that we respond to what we've heard. Our families need to know that they are partners with us in this work, because we can't do it alone as educators. There's no one who knows the child more than that child's parents and their family. And so we have to make sure that we're meeting those families with respect, and we're giving them a place in our schools to be heard, to be seen, to be valued. So those are the five big rocks, and that's where we're moving into next school year.
Man, you just crushed a couple of questions that I don't like you already. You just crushed. All right, because I wanted to talk about, because we're interviewing superintendents from some of the largest districts in America,
Okay.
Detroit, LA, New York, and you touched on the population that you're serving and that they're serving in the urban core is changing rapidly, with more people of color, Hispanics, and so forth. That's why I say you touched on a bunch of things. And
But that's okay. I'm willing to go deeper if you want me to. I was just trying to hit those five big rocks because they're so important. Like we have to think about all of those things when we think about educating the child. Is not just one thing. You've got to look at all those pieces and how they fit together. And then I think the important part too is understanding that schools and school districts cannot do this work alone. We cannot, and we've had to change. We've had to have a paradigm shift. We've had to adjust the way we do things and how we think about education, because many of us have gone to school. We have our doctorate degrees, and we believe we are the educational experts, and we are. But we also need our community working and helping us. Like when I talk about meeting the needs of students, our kids come to us with all sorts of traumas. We've not all been trained how to address all of those traumas and all of those needs that they have. But there are people in our community and organizations in our community that can and that want to help and support. And so I've been really thankful for all the organizations that are stepping up, have stepped up, are stepping up to help us serve our students and our families.
Again, like I said, you keep just covering all my stuff. I don't like because I want to talk about partnerships, because
Okay.
the nature and budgets are changing so much that the county and the city, and no matter what city, that they are going to, from my perspective, have to partner with our education systems from a financial contribute, because especially in urban core settings, because we're so needy per se. The other thing I wanted to touch on is that in this education mindset, a lot of educators, especially in the Kansas City lane, because we weren't accredited, and now that we are, they leave out to me, a key component, the sports in these schools, because a lot of schools, I always say, look at, I'm using colleges, but UCLA, Stanford, USC, they have excellent sports programs, but they have excellent academic programs. And a lot of schools are defined by their sports and what have you. And I think that you have a extra challenge, because urban core schools, most of them have been built so long ago that there's no room to really expand to do these suburban schools. They have 3 and 4 gyms, and in the urban core, I know I started my company at Lincoln Prep in '08. They got the cheerleaders got to use that gym, the track team got to use that gym, the basketball, both the girls and the boys got to use that gym. And they didn't even have a field to play in as it relates to football until just recently. And how do you try? It took a long time to raise money to even to get our fields together. And
Absolutely.
I wanted you to speak on that a little bit.
No, I appreciate that opportunity to speak on that, because that's so important. And a lot of that ties to the conversation that came out of our Blueprint 2030 discussion. As we look across our school system and we see all the deferred maintenance that we have, because we are a school system that has not passed a bond since 1967. And so what people don't understand is your bond money is the money that you typically use for your capital projects, those updates to the building, modernizing the building, sometimes rebuilding new. All of that typically comes from your bond proceeds. But because we have not passed a bond in this district for so long, we have not had those kinds of funds to address those basic needs in our schools. And so when you walk through our schools, many of them are very aged. And they're not in the best condition. And you're right, when you speak to some of the way that some of the gyms are. So we have one high school that has a gym that can't be used for games because of the condition that it's in. And you're right, we had teams that would have to travel to some other school to play on the football field. It's those kinds of things that we believe are not the right kind of experiences for our kids. And so as we were having the Blueprint 2030 conversations, we were talking about trying to pass a bond, trying to build some new facilities, trying to update our facilities so that our children have buildings that are commensurate to their peers. When our kids go out to Lee Summit or to Liberty, they shouldn't have to walk into those buildings and look at those fields and ask themselves, why not us? Why do our buildings look the way they look? No child in our system should have to have that question. But I'm sorry to say, I think so many of our kids, that is their experience. They go out there and they wonder to themselves, wow, these amazing facilities, state of the art. And then they come back to something that has been built in the 50s and 60s. I mean, and those are some of the newer buildings. We have some of our buildings are over 100 years old. And to imagine not having updates done to those older buildings, they just aren't built really to facilitate the kind of learning or the kind of experiences that we want our kids to have. And so that's why we were having those Blueprint 2030 conversations where we had to start talking about some potential closures. We don't want to close our schools. It's painful to think that we would have to close any of our schools. But we know that if our enrollment doesn't increase and if nothing changes around this bond, then we won't have any other choice. We'll have to figure out something so we have enough money, we can redirect funds to start addressing some of our deferred maintenance and capital needs. So that was part of our conversation. However, we did start to think about how we can pursue a bond in the future. And we're trying to look at the right date, the right timeline with everything. But that is something that we are going to be looking at in the near future, how we can pursue a bond in partnership with this community.
I'd like for you to, off the top of your head, make this pitch to this downtown council, because I feel that the corporate community has not really done right by our urban core schools in a monetary way. And from my perspective, everyone wants to have this great Kansas City, and really building up our downtown, which is close to our urban core. And I don't see how you can have that unless they really get involved. The Burns and McDonald's, the Black and Beaches, the Blue Cross Blue Shield, almost, and I think at one time they had, and they need to adopt the school and put some money into. Do you think that is a feasible way to add to your budget?
That is a way to add to our budget, but I think probably the most practical way to add to our budget, if all of those entities that you named and others will get behind us and support us with the bond. Because what the bond will do, typically most communities, they pass a bond every couple years. It's just standard. It's what they do in order to make sure they take care of their schools because they value education in their community. They value their children. We are one of the only communities in this nation that has not passed a bond, like I said, in over 50 years. If everybody in this community really cares about the children here, we value our children. And we have to remember this is about children. And I get frustrated sometimes when people get caught in the conversation around what grown-ups, what adults did 30 years ago, how they mismanaged money 30 years ago. All those things may be true. I wasn't here then. I'm not responsible for that. I can't be responsible for that. But ultimately, we cannot continue to ask our children to pay the price for that. Our children today, our children deserve quality education, quality state-of-the-art buildings, quality experiences. And that will only come if this community chooses to get behind our students. And one great way to do that is to supporting KCPS in a bond when we pursue it. That is one of the best things that can be done, because then it also frees up other resources that we have. Because what happens from year to year, because we don't have bond money, we take a portion of our funds, about 9 or 10 million every year, that should be going into schools and into education, and we put it to the side just to be able to do some patch-up work, to fix things that are broken, to manage things. We can't continue to survive like that. That money that we're using to patch up should be going into the classroom. It should be being used for education, to expand the fine arts across our district, to give all of our kids access to instrumental music, to give all our kids access to world languages, to have more beyond the four walls learning experiences where our kids can travel, go out into the community, visit, go across the state, have some of the same experiences that their peers who are from higher social economic classes have. We have to make sure that we're closing the gap for our children. And that's what equity is all about, is closing that gap, not holding our students responsible for maybe where they've come from, or what neighborhood they've come from, or what zip code, or their socioeconomic status. We've got to close the gap for our kids, because our children are brilliant. They are brilliant, and they deserve the experiences that will set them up for a great future. And that comes through education. And so if we value this community, we value our children, we've got to put our money where our mouth is, and we've got to get behind KCPS for this bond, and then also find ways to show up and support in schools. We do have organizations that do step up and they do donate, but we need more people to do that, who believe in the vision of KCPS and who believe in the children and families of KCPS.
Do you think that you have, from a staff point of view, I know, but like you said, 30 years ago, I started the Cub Scout program in the Kansas City School District at James Elementary and James Middle and Meservey Elementary. And when I did that, there were no males in the school district. And I wanted to, how important is that? Because I used to take them camping once a month. And because I was a founding board member of the Full Employment Council, I had connections with the corporate community. And I not made them pay for it, but coached them to pay for things that we were doing with the kids. And I found out that I was those kids' daddy, uncle, brother, and everything, because they didn't have male role models to work with them. And I want to pitch this to you. We've been interviewing the 50 Black educators that were inducted into the Wichita Black Educators Hall of Fame. And out of those 50 educators, they got 1,000 years of experience. Most of them have been superintendents, principals, and what have you. And so Cascade Media, we had talked to them about a little think tank on coming up with 5 things that are a hindrance for people of color getting education. And off the top of my head, I didn't do like I should. They came up with self-esteem plays a very important part. History, knowing your history is very important, and these things. But as I said, you beat me to the punch on a bunch of my stuff, Dr. Collier. And those are things that I think are very important for people of color. And
yes,
in general. If
absolutely.
you would like to elaborate a little bit, possibly.
Sure, yeah. In fact, I was doing some reading recently. Gholdy Muhammad, Cultivating Genius, she talks about that, and I've seen this in several pieces of literature and research, that in the early learning for African Americans, even during slavery, the most important tenet, the foundation for their learning was, number one, identity, knowing who they are. And people don't realize how important it is. That's why when I talk about the culturally responsive teaching and practices, what that does is it honors and respects our children's identity. It does not ask them to come into the classroom and to be somebody else, or to conform to some other way, as if their ways of being are deviant or a type of other. Our children in their culture is fine as they are, and that has to be cultivated and accepted and celebrated, not ignored or pushed to the side because we want them to become something else, as if who they are is not enough or not good enough or not the right thing. And so identity is so important for our children. And that also makes me think about the recent legislation that was trying to come through, even this past year. At the state level, there were some bills that were coming down that would prohibit educators from teaching about history and about culture. And really what it is Black history. Let's just say what it is. It's trying to keep keep us from teaching Black history, not allowing our kids to know who they are and their culture. They have to know from which they've come. And it's a shame that anyone would ask us not to teach Black history, because Black history is American history. So if you don't want us
Black
to teach
history, sorry for cutting you off, is history. As I tell people in general, I say, I don't care what color you are, what religion you are, you African if you human. And if you want to talk about humanity, it all starts in Africa, and it covers everything. The last thing I will say on that, I try to explain, because I am in media, and it has nothing to do with being racist or what have you. It has to do with history speaking the truth. Ever since the 7th century, Europeans have controlled 100% of all forms of communications on the planet. And even when you go to a Black college or a Black this or that, you are living in a Eurocentric world where what you do really doesn't have any weight in the big scheme of things. And as everyone is becoming more aware, because we have these tools at the Facebooks, the YouTubes, that you can look up almost anything. And that's the purpose of education, not to come out like an automaton, is to show you how to access information and so forth. So with that being said, I think you got your job cut out for you, Doc.
Yes, I do. I do. It's a big job, but I am excited about it, and I can see and dream of the possibilities that are before us, and I'm just excited about where we're going as a school system. I tell people all the time, I want people in a few years to look at KCPS and say to themselves, how in the world did that district accomplish that? And it's going to take educators that believe that it's impossible, that the things that we have not seen are possible. And I'm really proud of the fact that we have gained our accreditation. But for me, that's not the ceiling, that's the floor. That's the floor. We have so much more work to do, but we've got to build on that success, and we've got to continue to strive to be what we know we can be as a system. I can't wait to see our children thriving in their academics, thriving in their sports, thriving in their fine arts, playing their instruments, speaking world language. I can't wait to just see all the great things that are
You have
going
kids?
to. I do. I do.
Well,
I have a
see, you
daughter.
skipped over all of that crap. Yeah, talk about you. I want to know about your kids and your husband. The last superintendent, I used to have him on at the games, because both his kids, we have another network, Cascade Sports, and we
Okay.
cover all the urban core sports. And he'd be at the game. His son played basketball for Lincoln. His daughter was volleyball. And, you know, our people knew about it. Talk about your kids and your family a little bit before we get off.
Okay. Well, I'm married, and I'm married to a pastor. He's pastor of a church in Kansas City, Kansas, Pleasant Green Baptist Church.
No, exactly where.
Okay, good. Yeah, historic church. So my husband's the pastor there, and we have one child. Her name is Jillian, and she is actually going to be a freshman this fall at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. She is also a trained dancer. And so, like, when I talk about the arts, I mean, as you'll hear, I'm very passionate about the arts, but for me, it was music, but for my daughter, it's dance. And even as a high school student, a senior this year, she had so many gigs this school year, hired as a professional dancer across the city, but it's because of the training that she was afforded. And I know that many of our kids may not be able to afford that training on the side. I don't want them to be deprived of that opportunity. My goal is to get dance teachers in here from the conservatory at UMKC. Right now, I've secured 2 teachers to come in. One of them is already teaching at Paseo, and the other will be teaching at our 2 middle schools. But I want to see Black and brown ballerinas all across this district. And I want our kids, one of them who might be the next Misty Copeland, to have that opportunity. So what I dream of for my own daughter, my own Jillian, I dream of for all the kids here, but she's my only one. She's my one and only. So, but I have a twin sister too, who's also an educator. And she and I, we share children. So she has two boys, and her oldest son is at Morehouse, and her youngest son is a football player at KU. So you can say I have three kids if we combine the mine and my twin sisters.
Hey, my friend Michelle Wimes, her daughter, dance. She wound up.
Yes, Sydney.
Yeah,
Sydney.
Sydney. Yeah,
Yes, my daughter knows her well.
All right, and it's very important to have these opportunities. Everybody doesn't want to be this or that, and you have to have, like I say, mentors. And I'm going to close out. I got to steal my boy Jim Watt's closing a little bit. It was a plum pleasing pleasure to have you on the show. I'd be like, Jimmy, man, cut all them niceties out.
I like that.
and I want to ask you, what would you want to say in closing to potential students and to parents?
Well, to potential students, I want them to know that here in KCPS, we are committed to them. We're committed to hearing their voices. We're committed to serving them and to making sure that they have the kind of educational opportunities that they want to have as well, and that we're committed to ensuring that they thrive, pushing them towards success. I would say to our parents, number one, I want to say thank you to our parents who have entrusted their children to us. And to let them know that we're committed to improving, to being better every day as we engage in what we're calling moving forward together. Our parents' voices are also important to us, and we want to continue to partner with you to serve your children, to make sure that we are setting your children up for success. And we know we can only do that if we do it together. So we thanking my students, thanking my parents, and even thanking my staff. I really appreciate the staff of KCPS because they get the hard work done and they love on our kids each and every day. And so for that, I am truly grateful, just grateful.
All righty. As we close on all our programs, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
The program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.